Welcome to today's webinar, More Than Just Cloning, Editing Report Templates. Today we're going to begin by talking about how to decide what template to start with, some recommended basic edits. We're going to go over what a core source is and why it matters, and then we're going to look at how to edit display fields and filters to change the data that you see in your report output. And we'll finish up by talking about some of the dangers of using obsolete templates and how you can maintain your templates. So picking your starting template. The existing Sitka templates are widely varied and cover hopefully most of the reporting needs of a library. When choosing your starting template, there are some initial considerations. So what type of data are you looking for? Are you wanting to look at patron data, items, circulations, holds, etc.? Are you looking for a list or a count? So are you wanting to count titles, items, patrons, or are you wanting to actually list items and patrons? And what do you want to be able to filter on? Do you want to be able to choose a particular patron type or shelving location? Are you looking for a monthly report, or do you want to be able to cover a specific period of time? And what information is going to be critical to include in that output so you can actually work with that report? For example, a report listing all of your items with the status of missing that you can then use to go check the shelves with probably isn't very helpful if it doesn't include any call numbers. So the reporter is very powerful and can report on almost anything, but there are a handful of reports that can only be generated by pulling the data directly from the database. So if you can't find a template close to what you need, do contact co-op support and we can point you to an existing template or create a custom template or pull the data from the database. So I'm now going to switch us over to Evergreen here. And we'll just start off at the home screen there and then go into administration and reports. So we're going to start by saying that we want a report that gives us a count of items by status and shelving location. So in the shared folders, we're going to go to templates, Greenland templates, which is the equivalent of Sitka templates here on our training server. We're going to look in collection and we're going to go to item and title count. We're going to want to make sure that we have our rows set to 100. Some of the Sitka templates do have more than 10 templates in them, so setting them to 100 or 50 is a good way to make sure you're not going to miss any of the templates. So looking through the templates available in the item and title count folder, we can see that there are templates that are close to what we want. We've got title and item count by shelving location, title and item count by shelving location and circulation modifier, but we don't have one that's shelving location and item status. So we're going to go with the one that's closest. So title and item count by shelving location. We'll select that one, go back up to actions, and we're going to clone this template. I'm just going to tell it to put it into my collection folder here. And now we want to take a look at this template and decide if it is going to give us the information that we want. So we can look at what display fields it uses. It's going to show us the owning library, the circulating library, the shelving location, give us a title count, and give us an item count. And it's going to filter on whether the item is a precat. So if it's a precat, it won't be included. The circulating library, and it's going to exclude items that are deleted. Now, we can see that it gives us almost everything we want, except in the display fields here, we don't have a field for item status. So what you may want to do before making any changes to this template is run it once, see what the output looks like. In this case, based on what we're seeing here, it looks like this is what we want. We just need to add that field. So if we look at the paths that it's showing for the existing fields, for example, here for the shelving location, we can see that it's got in brackets here, this both required. And this indicates that nullability is going to be in play here. Now, what nullability means is that it allows you to control whether or not null values are included in your output by giving you control over the type of join between the database tables. We do have a link in the documentation to an Evergreen conference presentation that talks about nullability and is much better at talking about nullability than I am. So if you are interested in learning more about nullability, definitely recommend watching that presentation. But in general, I find that when adding new fields to a template, you just need to make sure that you're using the same type of join as the fields already in that template. So when we add our item status field, we're going to make sure that we include the join that is going to show both required as well. Now, before we actually add that field, I'm just going to take us back up to the top quickly because the current template name is based on the template that we've cloned, but we're going to change it so it's not going to be representative of our change template. So I'm going to remove the clone here and add item status. And I also probably want to update the description so that the description better reflects what this template is now going to do. So I'll add and item status here as well. So now that better reflects what our template is going to do. There's also the documentation URL here. And with that, if you have local documentation that you can link to that is relevant to what your user is going to be doing with this template, for example, if you have documentation on how missing items should be handled in your library, you could put that link in and it will be included when the template is run as part of the email notification. Now, when we go to actually add our new field, we're first going to take a look at the core source for this template. And those of you who've worked with templates in the old reporter may remember that this core source used to be editable. It's no longer editable when you're cloning a template, which is a good thing because if you changed that core source, it would wipe out all the data already set up for that template. But it's a good idea to take a look at that and see what it is and make sure that the core source makes sense for the template you're wanting to use and edit. The three most common core sources are item, ILS user, which is patron, and circulation. And I'm just going to take us over to a diagram that we have here in the documentation because I find this helps to kind of picture what's happening in the background. So that core source, which in this template is item, is the database table that your report is starting with. And here we can see some of the different information that gets saved in that table. Now, you can see that the tables link to each other, but they don't all link directly. So for example, the item table doesn't actually link directly to the bibliographic record table. It links via the call number table. And having a sense of those links and how the different tables link together will help you if you're trying to figure out where to find information for setting up different fields. So if we come back into our template, we can see here, this is our item core source. And here we have all the different tables that are linked to that. And one of those tables is item status. And you can see we also have that table call number and volume. And if we look at the field for call number owning library, you can see that to be able to link to that call number owning library, we've had to go from item into call number and volume into owning library, and then we've been able to include that call number owning library. And that's because the call numbers are specifically owned by particular libraries. So in this case, we're going to add item status. As I mentioned before with nullability, we're going to need to make sure that the join type we use is going to have that both required. And for that one, what it is it's an inner join. And all I did was click on that little Venn diagram, and I can now pick inner join. I'm now going to click on the item status table, and from here I can see the fields from that which I can add. So I'm just going to want to add the name of the field here. And you can see it's got that both required. Now, having a field labeled name isn't often very useful, especially if the field is related to library. As you could see at the top here, we've specifically said one of these is the call number owning library and one of them is the circulating library. For some of you, that will be the same library for all of your items, but anybody who participates in reciprocal borrowing or has multiple branches, the owning library and the circulating library aren't always the same for an item. So good to make sure that you have descriptive names for your columns so that you can tell what the data in them is. So instead of leaving this as being called name, we're going to change this to item status. It uses a transform of raw data, which is the most common transform used. You can see there's also for title count and item count, they're using count. Um, and that transform, it determines how the data is processed when Evergreen generates the report. So for those two count ones, it's actually counting the IDs for the records and the items, and then telling you how many are in the database based on what your report is filtering on. So we don't want item status to be the last field displaying in our report. So we're going to move it. And those of you who've moved columns before in the old reporter, hopefully you'll find the arrows here much faster and easier to use. So I've just used that arrow to bump that up to below shelving location. And I can now save my report and run it, or sorry, save my template and then run the report and see if it now gives me the information that I'm looking for. And I've actually already done that. So I'm just going to pull up the report here. And you can see we have a report for Maple Public Library, the training server library we're using. It shows us that call number owning library, the circulating library, the shelving location, the item status, the title count, and the item count. And you can see within the shelving location, it's breaking it down by that item status. Now, you can, by clicking on any of these headers, resort your data here in the HTML output. So if I click on item status there, you can see it's resorted, so it's by available. And then you can see the different shelving locations and the counts for what has the status of available. Now, if we decided this wasn't quite how we wanted our output to look, we could come back into Evergreen, pull up the template again to clone it. I've still got it open here. And we could then, if we wanted to rearrange things, we easily could. So I could put item status in front of shelving location. And then if I were to run that report, you can see, actually in this report, I've put item status and shelving location right at the top, followed by the library ones. And it's the exact same data that's showing, it's just arranged differently based on the order of your columns. So very easy to rearrange those columns. Now, coming back into the reporter, we're going to take a look at adding a filter, but we're actually going to use a different report template for that. So I'm just going to save my report template here. Oh, and I already have one in the folder named that. So I'm just going to give it give it a change there. So this time we're going to say we want a list of everything that is in a particular shelving location that has a particular status. So maybe when we looked at our report that gave us the count, we said, okay, we've got 11 items that have the status of missing in adult fiction. What are those 11 items? So if we come back here again under the shared folders and templates and in the collection folder, this time we're going to go to item list by item attributes. And again, I make sure that I have more than 10 rows showing. And we're going to look for templates related to shelving location or items. Sorry, or item status. And again, we can see we've got templates that are close, so we can run a report that shows us a selected shelving location and circulation modifier, or just a selected shelving location. We can run a report that shows us all items in a particular status, but we don't have any reports that include both shelving location and item status. So again, we're going to choose this one based on shelving location so that we can then modify it to do what we want it to do. Again, we'll go to actions and clone this template so we have the template editor. And again, you may want to save the template without making any changes, run it to see what the output looks like. In this case, we're just going to start making some changes. Again, we're going to adjust the name. And adjust the description. And you can see in the description of this one, it actually specifically says that you can remove unwanted display fields when cloning a template. And this template's a good example of that. It includes, if we look at the display fields here, a field called just down here, loan duration. And this is a feature that can be used with your circulation modifiers, but not all libraries use it. So if you don't use the loan duration item attribute with your circulation policies, this is going to be the same value for every single item on your report. So if you don't use it, you can just remove this field because it won't be relevant to you. And it's actually really easy to remove display fields. So all we're going to do is we're going to hit this minus symbol, and that field will no longer display in the report output. And maybe we also don't care about whether an OPAC on this, or sorry, whether an item on this report is going to be OPAC visible. We can remove that field as well. And we can go through and remove any additional fields that we don't want. Now, this report template is actually based off an older template. And I can tell that because for item status, it's showing that it's from the copy status table. And that actually changed with a previous upgrade. So before we can add a filter on item status, we're going to need to replace this item status display field because otherwise the report template won't work properly because it's trying to do two different things. So I'm going to remove that. And this is why after an upgrade, you'll often see that we replace templates because in some cases, database fields have changed names. So here again, we're going to choose item status. We're going to click on that Venn diagram and again choose inner join because we can see other fields are using that both required. And we're going to click on item status here. We've got our different options here. Again, I'm going to click name If we go down to the bottom here, we can update that again to item status, and you can see it now shows item status rather than copy status. And I'll just move that up, and I just want that under shelving location. Now, before we add the filter, I just want to point out one other thing, and I'm just going to click on the main item table here. In the fields that you have available, you've probably noticed that we have these brackets beside each field. And what those brackets are doing is they're telling you what type of data those fields are. So, for example, the active date and time is a timestamp. An alert message and a barcode are both text. We've got some Boolean, so can circulate is a yes or no, or true and false. We've got org unit. Some of them are money, but you'll also notice that some of them are link. And if we scroll down, you'll see that item status is available at that top level item, but it does show as link. And this means that you actually need to go into that table to pull the information as opposed to just checking the box here at the top level table, because it won't actually give you that specific information that you're looking for. Because as we saw when we went to item status specifically, there were a number of different fields that we could choose from. There are some very rare occasions when you would directly use a field that says link. Those tend to be the reports that we have Tina and Mark set up and edit because they tend to be specific situations. So now we're actually going to add that filter. So we're going to click on the filters tab here. We're already in the item status table. And in this case, we're going to click ID. Now, I know this goes against what I've just said about choosing one that has a link there. There's actually something going on with the training server. On the live server, this actually says text. So we're just going to click on that ID there. And that's now added it as a filter here. And we can see it's using the transform of raw data, which, as I mentioned, is the most common one. And it currently has an operator of equals. Now, you'll find that more commonly in templates for this kind of thing, we often use in list. So I'm going to change that operator to in list. The in list means that when you go to run this report, you're going to be able to choose any of the statuses from a list given to you. Now, I'm going to scroll us back up and talk about some of these other filters as well. So you can see that the location one for shelving location is also in list. So you'll be given a list of the shelving locations to choose from. And it's got a hint supplied to give you information about how to pick the value. And that information is actually from the old reporter. So you don't actually highlight a shelving location and click add anymore. So I'm going to update that hint so that it reflects the new reporter here. The is deleted filter is going to filter out any items that are deleted. And you can see the hint says that it excludes deleted items. This one you can see it's supplying a filter value, and the filter value is equal to false. So it's only including items where deleted is false. And you can see if I click on that filter value, I have the option of selecting true, false, or both, depending on what I want for my what I want my report to include. For something like is deleted, you're unlikely to choose both because then you just wouldn't have the filter to start with. So we're going to leave that one as false. And then we have the circulating library. So again, it's set to in list. And again, that hint, we're going to change it to select your library. Now, library filter, whether it's circulating library, owning library, patron home library, or any other library type that you see showing in the filters is crucial to have in pretty much all reports. This filter is what enables you to restrict the output to your library's data or data to do with reciprocal borrowing if you're participating in that. Running a report without a library filter violates the reporter privacy waiver that you signed to get reporter permissions. So it's extremely important if you're in here editing reports that you make sure that your report always has a library filter. There is maybe one or two reports that we have in the Sitka templates that don't include a library filter that are specifically looking at MARC records. But 99% of report templates have to have that library filter. So just make sure that if you are removing the library filter because you want to filter on a different type of library, that you make sure you add that new filter in. And then we're back here down to our item status filter. We've got it set to in list. We can supply a hint for it. And you also have the option to supply that filter value. Um, Now, this is easier than it used to be, which is great. So you could supply a filter value. You could say, I want the filter value to be missing. And this can be a really useful thing to do if you are wanting staff who are less comfortable with the reporter running reports, because you can hard code these filter values in so the report will output exactly what they want if they use that template. But it does make the templates less flexible. So if we hard code in the value of missing, this template can only be used to give us a list of missing items. If we don't supply the filter value, we're then able to pick any of the statuses when we go to run the report. So sometimes it's good to hard code that value in. Sometimes it'll just make it, it'll mean you have to have more templates to run different reports that are similar but using different filter values. And one other thing I want to point out for this report is we did pick the ID for the item status, and the shelving location also uses ID. Um, and you'll find that generally for filters, you're wanting to pick IDs or org units, whereas for display fields, you're wanting to pick names. And it's just the different information that the uh, reporter is using when it displays and when it filters. So IDs and org units for filters and names for display fields. So now we've made those changes. We'll save our template and we could go and run it. And here we have the report that is showing adult fiction and missing, and it shows us what those 11 items are. And if we went into the reporter, into that collection field, and into our report here, oh, sorry, our report template here, and went to run that report, you can see we get to pick that adult fiction shelving location. That is deleted. Filter is hard coded in. We can pick our library, which in this case is Maple, and we can pick that shelving, or sorry, that item status. And then we would go through, save our template, and we would get the output here. So I'm going to take us back to, just cancel this and take us back to that template. And I just want to point out how to get to some information that is very often included in templates, but is a little tricky to find if you don't know where to go looking for it. And that is information from the MARC record. So if you're wanting to include title, author, publication date, or any of that kind of information, ISBN, there's quite a little bit of a path to find that. And so we can see that here with the title field. So we start with item, we go into call number or volume, into bib record, into simple record extracts, and then we can find title. So if we go on the slide here, we would go into call number and we change that to the inner join as we go. We go into bib record, again changing that into the inner join. We'd scroll down to find the simple record extracts, again changing that to the inner join because we've got that both required showing here. And then in the simple record extracts, you can see we've got the most commonly needed mark fields for a report. And that path is included in the handout for this session. So you don't need to memorize it or quickly write that down. But it is a really valuable path to know because as you can see, there's a couple steps through to find that mark information. And we're going to look at one other piece here that we haven't touched on. So I'm going to hit close here. And in the Greenland templates again, this time I'm going to go into circulation and overdue and others. And I'm looking for the overdues within time span general based on checkout library. Because this one's a good template to look at with in relation to dates. So I'm going to go action and clone the template. And if we look at the display fields first, you can see we've got all sorts of patron information that'll come. We also have due dates, and you can see the transform there is displaying as date. So the system's going to pull a date. This one's interesting too, because for items title, you can see it's actually going to transform the title into all uppercase. You also have the option to transform a title into all lowercase, or just use raw data, which will pull the title out in the form that it is in the record. So for this particular one, somebody made the choice to set that and the author as uppercase. Now, if we look at the filters, we have a couple date filters here as well. So we have the due date filter, and again, you can see the transform that it uses is date. And we've got a check-in date time, again, using a transform of date. And this is one of the report templates where you'll see the operator being used is null. So what this particular template is looking for is items that don't have a check-in date. So the value for check-in date is null because if the item has a check-in date, it's not overdue. But you can see that there's a number of different ones that you can use with date. You can have equals, after, on or after, before, on or before, between, not between, that is null or is not null. Now, one of the transforms that you'll often see used with dates, which isn't actually date, is if we pull up this, you can see we've got a whole bunch of different date-related transforms we can use. And in this case, I'm going to choose month. And rather than saying between, so instead of getting a date in between, I'm going to say the operator in this case should be in list. And what this means is you could then select a specific month and put it in a list. You could actually put multiple months into that list, and then the system pulls the data for anything due within that particular month. And this month transform is what's used in the monthly statistics, circulation statistic report templates that we have. So it's handy to be able to know how to go set up the month in the list. Also handy to know how to do a date that either equals, is after or on, before or on, or is between, so that you can pick two dates and say, I want everything that is due between these two dates. So very useful with those date fields. And we're not actually going to run this report. Now, the final piece here is talking about the obsolete templates. And as many of you may remember back in April, though I know April was a while ago now, when we moved to the new reporter with our last upgrade, it did mean that most templates that were created in the old reporter didn't work properly anymore. And you saw that with the report where I needed to remove the item status field as the display field and put it back in because that actually is an old report that the training server had pulled in, and it would not have worked if we hadn't made that change. So we do strongly encourage that everybody deletes any templates that you have in your folders that were cloned before April 7th, 2025. Because those report templates, uh, they may run but not work if you try to edit them, or they may not run at all. They may just give you error messages when you try to use them. If you're holding on to any templates because there isn't a new version available in the Sitka templates folders, please send us a ticket and we'll get a new one added. We do also recommend that everyone review their templates on a regular basis. Co-op support updates the Sitka templates when we discover a template isn't working as reported. Is as expected, especially when we get reports from libraries letting us know that something isn't running properly. As well, we work to update templates when there's a change with an upgrade that affects them. And as we talked about earlier, how data is stored in Evergreen tables sometimes changes, sometimes the table names change when we upgrade, and then we update those affected templates so that accurate information is being output. When we replace existing templates with a direct replacement, we do try and keep the name as similar as possible or use the same name to make it easy to identify those matching replacement templates. And if you are looking to replace one and you're trying to just figure out if your template is newer or older than the Sitka template, like if have you cloned it from that template, if you take a look in your folders here, there's a date created column. And so you can look at that date created column, um, and is the date created in your folder before or after the date created in the Sitka template folder? So if the Sitka template folder has a date that is after the one you have, you should clone the new version of the template. As well, it's important to make sure that your reports, especially your recurring reports, are running off templates that are saved in your folders. If you have reports that are run directly off the Sitka templates, it does cause problems on our end when we're trying to replace those templates. And so we recommend periodically using a report template called Reports Run in Specific Time Period by Specified Library. And this is included in the handout. And you can find this report in the Sitka templates under Local Administration. So it's this one here, the Reports Run in Specified Time Period by Specified Library. And if we go to run that report, and actually you would clone this report. I'm going to show what it would look like if we just ran it. But before you run it, make sure you clone it into your own folders. You'd specify the time period. So maybe you want to just know what reports have been run in the month of October, so the last month. Pick your library and then run the report. And if we go cancel here, we do have this report. Oh, sorry, I'm in my templates. Let's go to my output. And I think it's this one. Yeah. So here's the report output for that for Maple. So this is actually reports on Maple that were run in November. You can see most of them are run out of the Sitka Reports MPL templates folders, which is the user that we're currently logged in as. You can also see that I ran that reports run in specified time period by specified library directly off the Greenland templates report. So on the live server, of course, you'd see Sitka templates, but anytime you see that Sitka templates in the template owner username folder, it means it's been run directly off those reports, and you should go in, make sure you've cloned that template into your own folders if it's one you're going to need to use again, and delete that report output so it's no longer attached to the Sitka template. And just a useful thing to run periodically, see what reports are running at your library, and yeah, whether they're being run off the Sitka templates directly or out of your own folders. The recurring field is useful here. It shows as a 0 for all of these ones because these are all one-off reports. But if any of these were a recurring report, it would show a 1 here to indicate that that's recurring. And we definitely encourage libraries to be proactive as you're able, know what reports are being run, and make sure that recurring reports get stopped when the staff members running those recurring reports leave your library. And that brings us to the end of today's session. I'm going to stop the recording and then see if we have any questions.